Hello and welcome to the Undercut Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Billington, and we're back to review all of the action from the first half of the 2025 Formula One season. Joining me to do this once again is Mr. Thiemo Daly. How are you?
Very good, thank you, Mr. Billington. How about yourselves?
I'm doing all right. I'm freshly showered and pretty much freshly out of bed as well, because for once we're doing this as an early morning recording, and that is to make room for our friend and podcast and Formula driver coach, Martin Villari. How are you, Martin?
Good, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for making me feel bad, but I hope it's worth it.
I was going to be getting out of bed and getting up at this point anyway, so might as well jump on,
Beautiful.
on a recording and have a good chat.
The correct answer is it's always worth it when Martin comes on the podcast. Honestly, own goal there.
No, it's to the same effect. But yeah, we might as well. I think we've got a lot to talk about at this mid-season review for. So we will dive right in. And we'll kick off with McLaren. We'll go sort of team by team order. At the moment, it stands with Piastri leading the championship and Lando Norris close behind him in seconds. Team, I know you've got some notes jotted down already. I'll let you kick off.
Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, and despite all of the massive amount of variables that you have in Formula One, I think you can bottle it down to three things, maybe. Let's try and argue. Anyway, if you want to have success in Formula One, you need the team, you need the drivers, and you need the car. And if all three of those work in more or less harmony, you're going to have a good time of it, or at least be competitive. And McLaren have definitely got all three of those at the moment, and that has resulted in domination, quite frankly, but kind of a quiet domination because we've not seen a lot of action between Piastri and Norris. We've had incidents here or there and the odd battle here and there, but we haven't had fireworks as we've maybe come to expect and still could get. But it's been quite interesting to watch how this goes out because both drivers have made mistakes earlier on in the season, but they've then balanced out, and then the other drivers then made mistakes as well to help counter this, and hence this really tight title battle. And it's been quite interesting. And looking back over the results, the Chinese sprint race, of all things, counts very harshly against Norris and just shows how slim those margins are when you look at points. And it's quite interesting to see from a mental aspect the psychology that goes into both drivers. I mean, Piastri, he always looks so measured and calm. Then Norris, he has these swings and roundabouts moments, sort of thing, where when he's on it, but when he's not, you can visibly tell. Whereas Piastri, he's got the same face for every emotion, and that's great fun. But it doesn't help you try and see what's going on behind the mask. But also means that Norris shouldn't be underestimated. We've seen that in the second half of this first half of the season. And I think as long as it goes the way it is and barring any massive mishaps, we should maybe get a title fight that goes down to Abu Dhabi that is actually allowed to play out properly this time. But let's say driving style wise, I'm sure mine's got a couple more things on there just for the differences between Piastri and Norris.
Yeah, Martin, what's your take so far on McLaren and how they're sitting?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Timo, you mentioned the mental side and pressure. There's definitely that. And then there's also the driving side. If I can just touch on both. I was listening to the Red Flag podcast earlier this morning where they had Alex Brundle on. I'm not sure if you guys have heard it as well. Have you guys come across it yet?
I haven't listened to the Red Flag app yet. No.
Yeah, it's with Alex Brundle. Have you heard it, Timo? No.
Heard bits and pieces, but not this episode that you're referring to.
Yeah, and he was pretty much like spot on. I quite like Alex's takes a lot of the time. I think he was like the drivers are on par technically. It's going to come down to, as that pressure builds as we approach the end of the season and we just get convergence. It's going to come down to who can do that under pressure, and therefore speaking more to the mental side of driver preparation, mental mindset, concentration, ability to perform under pressure, no mistakes. It's just going to come down to all of that. They both got the speed. They're trading wins. Okay, Lando's won a few more than Oscar recently, but I think it'll come down to that. I agree. I think it will. From the technical side, yeah, there's not much to split between them. Lando's got this new front end suspension that seems to suit him better. Oscar didn't want to take it. As I understand, he tried it in Hungary for a little bit. I'm not sure if he has it. It's not performance enhancing. It's just feel, as I understand. I think the MCL39 has been a more natural fit for Oscar than it has with Lando. I don't think Oscar's covered the full deficit from last year to Lando on his own. I think the new car, the anti-dive, I think it's played more into his hands or away from Lando's hands. And so there's a bit of that going on. I think that, yeah, lap time wise, they're on par. And it'll come down to who can do it under pressure. Something I tell my drivers is when the pressure's on in these very important situations is just go back to basics. Just like if it's a start, for example, pull your clutch, watch your lights. When the lights go out, go. Just go through your motions. Like in qualifying, get your banker lap in, get your good lap in, get your turn one, right? Like just really just bring it back to basics. You don't need to do anything extra special. You just need to not mess it up.
I think that's interesting because of what we've been saying at several points about several teams, quite frankly, over the course of the first half season, is this go back to fundamentals idea, as you say,
Mm.
and something that hopefully doesn't immediately kind of turn in on itself at the next Grand Prix is Lando's starts whenever he's on pole at the moment. We used to have the running gag basically, of any time he'd start on pole and he'd lose it around turn one at the latest. And
Mm.
now that maybe that hasn't been completely eliminated, but it's less of an obvious thing to happen. And I think, like you say, you've got to focus on those fundamentals because if you can't do those, then
Mm.
what chance do you have for the rest of the Grand Prix weekend?
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's interesting watching the two across the season, sort of personality wise as well. You can sort of it's easy to draw some sort of correlations or sort of similarities between Piastri and sort of quieter drivers of four. So you look at like Kimi Raikkonen, the sort of says little, does everything sort of behind the scenes, gets his tech right, gets his drive right, and that's it. And there's sort of also this isn't to try and besmirch Norris, but certainly a huge level of dedication from Piastri. This sort of one track mind focus on he is here to go racing and he is here to focus on his racing. If you look at the gap we had leading up to Spa, Oscar sort of wasn't really active on social media. And the one thing he did post was him doing like a lap breakdown around Spa on a sim rig.
Hmm.
He's sort of
Hmm.
so incredibly one track minded to all I really care about is making car go fast in funny circle. And that sort of comes across in their performance. You see at the weekend, you see both drivers will get up to speed across the weekend, but then one of them will get up to speed a bit quicker. They'll both reach the same endpoint. They'll both be as sort of ferociously competitively quick, but
Mm.
Oscar is often more ready to sort of find the time around a lap, and is why we sort of often see him leading the way in sort of the free practice sessions, as he's perhaps better suited in the mindset to sort of be able to build up to it. And I think long term across the season, that could be sort of the healthier and more sort of favourable play.
As Martin
Yeah.
was mentioning, though, we've had these podcasts lately that have had interesting points. I don't know if you two both heard the interview with Jackie X last week on Beyond the Grid, but he put an interesting point up saying how post his Formula One career, he's gone off and done a million things, and he's loved all of it because he had absolutely no idea about any of it during his time in Formula One. Because during his time in Formula One, he was focused on, you guessed it, Formula One, and just being extremely narrow-minded and focused because you have to be ruthless in this sport and put everything into it. And it just made me think that Norris, he comes out occasionally with these quotes of he wants to be a nice guy, he wants to be remembered for yeah, maybe winning a championship, but it's not going to matter because we're all going to be dead in this entry and all these cheerful things. And then you've got Oscar on the other hand, who, like you say, Jesse, is just so incredibly focused on the one task in hand. And I'm sure he's doing other things, but you don't see any of it, and you don't get the impression he's focusing on any of it. And also, probably he's not doing too much else besides Formula One, where Lando's got all these other distractions, and that might help him in the same way that it helps Lewis, as we've seen later on in his career. But at the same time, I don't recall Lewis doing that until he had at least a few championships in the bag. And I
Mm.
think that's one of the interesting differences between the two that could be fun to watch over the rest of the season as well, because you've got this old school racer in Oscar, let's say, who's just absolutely focused on the task in hand, and you've got Lando who's trying the new approach, let's say. And there's no reason that both can't work, but ultimately one's going to work better than the other when we get down to it.
Yeah, if I can just add, Timo, you touch on an interesting point, which is like, I was having this conversation the other day about what makes a champion a champion. What do they do that's so special? And even in that Chris Harris video with Max Verstappen, he kept
Mm.
asking, what is it about Max that makes him so special? And I think you nailed it on the head there, Timo, because it's not what they do, it's what they don't do. It's the stuff that they're not involved in. It's not the golf. It's not the social media. It's not the interviews. It's not the sponsorships. It's not any other form of media or dinners or it's Max is just a racing driver. And that's all he wants to do. And that's what makes Max a champion. He's not doing anything, at least in my opinion, outside of the magical realms of, operating a car on its limits. I think a lot of drivers can do that, but Max can just do it time and time again.
When it comes to sort of racing style for Oscar, certainly one of the interesting things that came out of the Goodwood Festival of Speed, they had this sort of giant balcony interview with a load of former world champions. And Alain Prost sort of came out, and they obviously, the conversation turns to the current championship. And obviously Prost, maybe because he has his ties to McLaren, but also said sort of, I see a lot of myself in the way that Piastri is going about his season. The fact that he's so incredibly focused on this one thing, he's going over the data, he goes over his setup, he has everything prepared so he can have as perfectly a clean execution to the weekend. And even on weekends where Piastri isn't winning, he's still on the podium, he's still at that top end of the fight. And that sort of, that level of consistency is sort of part of what certainly Alain Prost reckons is going to keep Piastri in this title fight with relative ease. And yeah, it's interesting when you see sort of several generations prior drivers looking and going, these are the interesting bits that still stand out. There's obviously transference.
Yeah, you touch on a point, Jesse, where Oscar gets to the track and he's like on it straight away or much quicker than Lando. I just wanted to follow up on that. There's probably two reasons why. The first is the preparation. Like you said, I think Oscar just hits the ground running and can deliver that lap time quickly because I think he's slightly better prepared. I just get that feeling from the outset. Secondly, I just feel like he's more comfortable with the McLaren as it is in its basic state, and that gives him confidence to go out and just play. Whereas I think Lando's got to every weekend he's got to refine that again, and I think it'll hurt him in the sprint races because you don't have time to prepare and get up to speed, of which we have two left, don't we? Do we?
Yes, we've still got three. We've got Texas, Brazil, and Qatar with sprint races.
Okay.
And if you look at the three sprint races we've had, Miami's the only standout one where Norris has come out on top with a win, but again, Piastri in second place. China, Piastri came second with Norris down in eighth, and in Belgium, Piastri second, Norris third. So there is credo to that argument.
There's something there. Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I've been trying to put my finger on, with the driving styles that the drivers have and the tracks that they're strong at, what's going to play out for the rest of the season. I don't see a story there, to be honest. It's just sometimes they're on it, sometimes they're not. I'm trying to think in terms of, is it street circuits? Is it long corners? Is it fast flowing? I know Oscar likes that faster nature. So maybe America, Texas, he'll like that sort of track. But it's funny because people always say, oh, this track's not really representative. It's not like a typical track. They're all unique in their own way. Like, what does Azerbaijan have to do with America? I'm looking at the list now. What does Azerbaijan, the street circuit, have to do with Texas? And what's that got to do with Mexico at altitude? And what's that got to do with Abu Dhabi at night? Like, they're all unique. You know what I mean? So you got to be able to speak multiple languages. And yeah, Brazil in the rain, again, that's going to be totally different.
I'd say not being representative is just an easy excuse. Essentially, you're saying you did badly, though, and you don't want to take responsibility for it.
I think that's the new thing, eh? Like when we got to Melbourne, it's not really representative. Well, like they're all really
Understood.
unique. Yeah, they're all really unique. So yeah,
that's the challenge of Formula One, is being able to nail down every type of circuit. Meanwhile, when it comes to challenges, one team seems to be facing a broad array of them, and somehow they're still in second place in the Constructors' Championships. That's, of course, Ferrari. Leclerc currently standing fifth and Hamilton in sixth. And it's always been, it's an odd one to try and pick apart how they've ended up here.
The analogy I was using just now with McLaren and what I'm probably used for a few of the other teams is you need the three factors to be having a decent season if you can do them all well, of the driver, the car, and team. They had a great car last year. And the team aspect was probably the aspect that they need to work on most, because they had Leclerc and Sainz, great drivers. You replace Sainz with Hamilton, you know that even when he's doing badly, as you could argue he's doing now, he's still going to be good by all comparisons for other people. So the team was the bit they still need to sort out. And they looked at their car and went, let's redo all of it, basically, and let's focus on that instead. And it makes you wonder where they would be now if they just evolved last year's car. And as you say, just the frustrating thing is there's still some P2 overall. And that's after a disqualification early on, bearing in mind as well. And it's just this very awkward, odd Ferrari thing of they do all of this and they're still somehow in exactly the same place. And you're just left scratching your head a little bit. And the optimistic part of me says that just getting all of the nonsense out of the way this year so that next year, as we always know, it will be the year. But just still, it still messes with you because the team aspect is still there. Communication, I think, with the team and the drivers is one of the biggest bugbears I've got with them and out of everyone in F1 this season. And I was thinking it's just a little bit insane that P2 for the team with multiple podiums for Leclerc and only one non-points finish for Hamilton and having a sprint win still leaves us somewhat disappointed. So I don't know how much we're to blame for this as well, but I don't think Ferrari help us either with the emotional coil they put us through pretty much every weekend. So I don't know what to do with any of it, basically.
So I'm not sure what to add. Yeah, go on, Jesse.
No, it's a tricky one with Ferrari because I think coming off the back of Hungary, where they seem to be making some very unique decisions when it came to the tyre strategy and potentially pressures and ride heights, there's something underlyingly wrong with the car as it stands. There's something completely incorrect with its suspension design that means that every race weekend they're having to try and sort of battle against it. And it sort of takes you back to the old sort of like F14 days of the Ferrari. If they had got the design better, and with the two incredibly talented drivers they've got in it, would we be seeing better results? If you go back to the sort of absolutely terrible Ferrari that Fernando Alonso had for a season or so, and if you go, but what if they actually built a decent car or one that he wasn't having to constantly fight? If you look at Charles Leclerc having to sort of go for a two-stop strategy on hard tyres that are pumped up to the maximum to keep the plank off the floor, you begin to think, well, maybe he would have stood a chance of at least holding on to a podium. And you spread that out to Lewis, who's still learning to get on with the team and getting the ropes of how to deal with a very nuanced team in the sport. I think Ferrari have somehow
Diplomatically put.
Yeah, that Ferrari have ridden their own kudos for too long, and as a result, they've sort of become a bit belligerent when it comes to actually changing their practice, their order, their structure. And we might see that change happen in the gap for 2026, I think, possibly driven by Hamilton.
Yeah, he's definitely getting his hands dirty, isn't he, with the team organizational structure, the ways of working, who reports to who, how the car feels. I think there's two issues ongoing in parallel at Ferrari. There's the car and its development, and obviously the lap time from the car. But then there's the operations, the guys at the track getting the best out of it. At the moment, in my opinion, neither are really. Obviously, the car's not great, but I think I would argue that even if they came out with a good car in 26 and they left their current race operations lineup, they're not ready for a title, that team. Like there's some really basic fundamental mistakes that are happening on the pit wall. So, but both of those need to take a step forward. I think this should be a year where I don't know. You guys have heard a lot of radio messages between Lewis and his engineer, Charles and his engineer, to the extent that they have a words of wisdom book of nonsense communication. How is that still a thing? Surely you restructure and move things around to make it work, improve the communication, improve the strategy. While the car's not decent, we've got time, space, capacity to be able to play in that area and make changes and fix that. So when the car comes good, bang, we can go for a title. I still feel like even if the car is good, like let's say they had a car as good as the McLaren, I just don't see them putting it all together with the current race engineers and strategists that they have.
We saw elements of that last year, I feel like, with McLaren as well. They arguably had the best car, and Verstappen in the third best car was still able to beat them. And you go, that's probably part of the operational side of it. And they clearly learned from it. I think with Ferrari, got to build up your point there, Martin. You hit the nail on the head there this time in terms of if you don't have the best car for next year, it's almost less of an issue because as long as you've got the operation and the communication side of it sorted, it's going to be not really easy, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more straightforward to figure out what to do with it because you know each other so well. And it's going to be difficult for Lewis to find that after being with Bono for so long. But at the same time, there's a 180 and there's a 180, and he feels like he's done an extra 180 and he's still facing in the wrong direction slightly. And you go back to Miami, there's the obvious example of, well, that was very entertaining to listen to. How frustrating must that have been for Lewis while he's trying to race around a circuit? And again, I think it was Spa. He was
China
out,
as
and
well.
that's Spa as well. Yeah, the qualifying there, he was pretty much back to the pits, and he had to ask, "What's the deal with the qualifying? Where am I?" I'm like, "You've not told him yet." He's like, "It's a seven-time world champion in a Ferrari," and you all
Mm,
suddenly like, "Oh, I don't want to be the one to tell him." Like, grow up, communicate with
yeah,
him, and he doesn't mind if he's done badly. He just wanted to know so that he can already start thinking on the cool down map. Where do we need to improve, and what can we do? And if you can't do that, then yeah, like you say, you're not ready for a championship, and
you're not ready.
we don't
Yeah.
deserve one as a team.
Spa just China, sorry, just came to mind because when Leclerc was missing half the front wing, and there was
Oh yeah, yeah.
Lewis was that whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I
So
mean,
many happy memories to choose from.
I know it's not good.
the communication issue is so stark when you compare it to McLaren, who sort of steamed off into the distance. And you look at the way that McLaren's pit wall communicates with its drivers, as much as everyone sort of questions Will Joseph's long questions to Lando Norris, it's a relationship that for them really works. Lando likes the detail, the coaching, the constant feedback. And at the same time, Oscar Piastri is the opposite of that. He enjoys sort of very short, very quick yes or no answer questions, but it means that he can also get across exactly what he needs. He can get the information he needs quickly, and the team can work from that. They know what to expect from their drivers and they know what to tell their drivers. And you get the same with Max and GP as well. As much as it's funny when they're sort of bickering with each other on the radio, there is a working relationship there that is able to transfer the data, the information that both sides need, well, clearly, succinctly. Ferrari just doesn't have that link even between its driver and its engineers, let alone
Mm.
within the team itself. There's sort of this traffic jam of like intellect that
It
stops
feels
them.
like a grandparent and a grandchild trying to work out Zoom for the first time together.
Yeah, one of them sort of knows what's happening, and they're trying to sort of coach the other one through it, but there's sort of a short stop in sort of actually understanding what's going on. It's tricky.
How it feels like with Ferrari is they've got their driver, race engineer, and then other driver, other race engineer, and there's no link between the two race. There is literally no link between the two race engineers at all. It's always like, I'll check with the other, like, let's say Hamilton asks his race engineer something. It's like he has to check in with the other side and get communication back. There's no one that sits on top.
And
I
then it
think
feels like it's a game of Chinese whispers in between as well. So even the
yes.
communication they are doing is still wrong to what it should be.
Yes. So then, yeah, by the time it go engineer back to Leclerc, yeah. So there's nothing. I think there should be someone that sits on top and is like, nah, Lewis needs to give that to Charles. That has to happen immediately. Race engineers tell your drivers what has to happen. So that that
I have
person
the
is
solution.
missing.
You bring in Kimi Räikkönen as the middleman because you're not going to get any bullshit then. You're going to know exactly what's going on.
Yes. So who would that normally be? Is that like I know at McLaren that would be a Randy probably at Ferrari? Is that
Strategist.
Fred?
I think Fred would sit above it. There is You'd think that Ferrari have a race strategist that sits there and does sort of like the overall
The
team.
fact that you say you'd think is not confidence inducing.
But yeah, given the results we've seen and the way that they've sort of procured those results, you're sort of left thinking that basically they produced two different race plans for two separate drivers operated by two separate teams. There isn't that cohesion between
Correct.
what they're doing, knowing that you can use one to overcut or undercut the other to open up a gap for the other driver. There isn't that
Correct.
synchronization between the two halves of the garage. And I mean, previously when we've seen that sort of lack of harmony between two sides of the garage, for Lewis, that works brilliantly. He's able to utilize that to his best results. We saw that at McLaren when he joined. But now we're seeing sort of, unfortunately, a team that maybe has its allegiances sort of already pre-baked in Charles Leclerc. Lewis has got sort of this double uphill battle of not only getting used to a very quirky Ferrari, in quirky in the sense of it's very different to McLaren and Mercedes that he's been at previously, but also he's got this uphill battle because yes, he is a seven-time world champion, but he is not the Prince of Ferrari, and there is sort of like these two battles, both the emotional and practical, that he's got to overcome.
Hmm. And I think it goes without saying, but it's an important point. Both of those teams, like Hamilton and his race engineer, Leclerc and his race, both of those teams within the team, they both want the best thing for their driver. So they're not willing to compromise. And by the time they work it out with this mystery third person that sits on top and does it all, then it's like in Miami, Hamilton lost the advantage of that tire and Leclerc lost his advantage in China. And it was just by the time the decision's done, it's all over anyway. You know what I mean? It's like these need to be done like before the car gets to the following car. You know what I mean? So that they waste laps behind each other as well. I don't know. It just feels messy. Even if they had a good car, I don't think they're going anywhere. Yeah.
The last point I just want to make on that, you reminded me there, is that you could argue that being in second place, you have the old adage of they're the first losers. So essentially, they need to be thinking as if they're not a top team, because unless you're at the top, you're not a top team technically. And maybe
Mm.
following along the lines of what Haas were doing last year and what Sauber are doing this year, especially with the drivers. You see Hulkenberg helping Bortoletto out in qualifying. Sometimes he doesn't need the help. Sometimes Hulk doesn't need the help, but they compromise and they work together and they figure it out, because they know that until we get to a point where we're fighting for podiums and wins and championships regularly, there's no benefit from just one of us succeeding. We need both of us up there, so let's work it out together and figure it going forwards. And I think Ferrari could do with taking that reality pill and going, yeah, you're not at the top, you haven't been for a very long time. And maybe, just maybe, there's a reason for that that you should maybe have a look at, and maybe this would be a way of trying to resolve that. I mean, even if it doesn't work, you're probably not going to get overtaken by Mercedes. You're definitely not reaching McLaren this year. So what's the harm in trying it out? As you say, like, they're not in a position at the moment to do any winning. So why not figure out the gremlins now while you can minimize the risk?
I'll be doing a lot of changes and with the plan to go back if they don't work. So
Mm.
that looks like Ricardo Adami gone, Brian Bosey gone, two new race engineers, senior figure at the top. Try that for a few races. If it doesn't work, fine, go back to the other guys. But you got nothing to lose now.
You must say at the very least you've learned something.
Yeah, I've done a bit of digging. I found they do have a race strategist or head of strategy for Ferrari. It's
Good news.
Ravan Jain, and yeah, he's only been in the role since 2023. So potentially there is also a lot for him to learn when it comes to getting used to that team. So, but again, he's been at Ferrari as a sort of mathematical engineer since 2016. He's been around at Ferrari for nearly a decade. So at least you'd think he knows how to sort of work within that sort of jumbled
If I've learned
environment.
anything about Ferrari at this point, I assume nothing about them or their personnel and what they're capable of.
The other thing is you mentioned mathematical background, and I've been saying for the longest time, not everything in F1 needs to be a deterministic calculation prediction model. Like sometimes you've just got to look at the race for what it is and make a call based on that. It
It's
doesn't,
the
you
whole
know,
rain
yeah.
argument, right? You've got all the weather and the radar, but you still get the people sticking their hand out with things. You know, there's a pretty easy way to find out if it's raining.
Yeah,
The
it's
easier way
that.
still is like some teams will even have just like a junior personnel station sort of upwind
Mm.
basically, and they will simply phone in when they feel rain. I know that they've had that certainly for Portimao where the weather radar wasn't quite as on the money. I know Mercedes just had someone stood on the beach literally about to phone if they knew rain was coming in, and sometimes you can't beat the old methods. But anyway, speaking of Mercedes, currently sat third in the Constructors' Championships, Russell P4, Antonelli clinging on to P7, I think is the fairest way to describe him.
Yeah, he's having a bit of a roller coaster season so far. I think he should be fine in the long haul, but he needs to get out of the rut that he's in at the moment. And Ryan's going to have a thing or two to say about that, I think. So I'll leave Antonelli for a minute, but Russell on the other hand, because there's just less to say about him, because he's essentially just looked at Leclerc last year and gone, I'll have some of that, in terms of he's just quietly, for the most part, going about his business, getting podiums left, right, and centre, getting the nice win when the opportunity comes along, and the rest of the time just quite falling in line, but essentially falling in line, driving his race, and not drawing too much attention to himself. And you wouldn't know he's in half the races because he's just a bit anonymous, but anonymous in a really good way, I think, and getting those points home, refining his craft and proving why he deserves that contract extension, I think, basically. So Russell, not too many notes in my end. I'll let you two debate and study a bit more.
No, I'll join you on the Russell front because he's had four results outside of the top five and only two results outside of the points finishes. So his level of consistency and performance this year has been pretty fantastic when you consider he's always up there in that top five. If you take your top five and you immediately discount the two McLarens from it, that's essentially a top three finish every weekend when you sort of ignore the runaway front runners. It's a really strong performance from Russell, and he's getting everything out of that car. He's grown so accustomed to that team and has really worked his way into it really nicely. There's nothing to say about him. He's done absolutely everything he needs to do this season. He's got a win out of it. He's regularly in contention for the podiums. I reckon there'll be at least another win or two for him this season. I think we're going to have weekends where he's able to capitalize on things. It does, however, throw into stark contrast the other side of the garage.
No, I agree with everything you said about George. There's nothing to say. I think he's done like almost as good as you can ask, like a near perfect job, but almost driver of the season. Like who, okay, you could maybe throw Max in there, but Max done some clumsy shit in Spain. Do you know what I mean? So George doesn't have that. So I think George has been for me really excellent. He's very professional. Antonelli, okay, he's 18. We get it. He's going to have to find his feet. It's going to be hard. I think the thing is when these rookies come in and the performance drops, they enter this very dark place, this very deep, dark struggle. And it's so hard to come out of that. It's really hard. Max even entered in that, he was crashing in Monaco a few times. I think he crashed in Monaco one weekend 3 or 4 times. So it's really hard. Like Franco's in that at the moment, for example. It's really hard. And then how do
You
you
have to
pull
be
them out?
arguing that Franco had a good spot to begin with, to be fair, but this
Yeah,
season.
Franco, I thought, I think and Antonelli as well, like P4 in his first race. And then Franco
Mm.
got points in his first couple of races with Williams. And then you enter the reality of the struggle. And then it is hard. Franco, I think, still in there. Antonelli's still in there. Like there's two things I'm thinking. Number one, are they prepared enough when they come in, to cross that bridge and not fall into that trap? That's the first thought. The second thought is, how do you actually come out of there? That's really challenging. I'm not close enough to the circumstance to be able to know technically exactly what it is. Now it's obviously got a
Jesse and I were
mindset
talking about
implication.
this after Hungary and
Mm,
saying that Antonelli and Mercedes, pre him joining F1, they clearly did almost everything, let's just say, because we just can't account for everything correctly. They put him through an incredible amount of testing and sim work and old cars and getting up to speed and everything. And then he got to F1. And to answer the second part of your question there, kind of just left him to it, it feels like, in a way, and goes, well, he's here now. It's all sorted and we don't need to do anything else now. And you go, oh no, he still needs, he's still 18, as you keep like to remind us, and he's still a
mm.
rookie in his first season and he's replacing Lewis Hamilton. He's got all these pressures. You kind of have to keep going with the development. Why would you put in all of this background if you're not going to follow it through and make sure that your investment keeps paying off into the future? And when he gets into this dip, like you say, he's going to be struggling because it's all new for him, and he it's so easy to compound that negative momentum without realizing. And you just need that one good thing. But if you don't get that one good thing, or if it only comes in the middle of a weekend and not the end of a weekend, you're going to forget it by the time you go home on Sunday. And
Mm.
that's where I feel like they need to capitalize on and make the most out of it, because as we said, they did everything right to get here, but now they're here, they've gone, we can just leave them to it now. And you go, yeah, there's the whole, you've got to let them swim at some point sort of thing. That doesn't mean, okay, we've got the basics done, rip off the armband, chuck him in at the deep end and just leave him to it. And if he drowns, he drowns. That's kind of a bit irresponsible.
I think there needs to be a bit more coaching for Antonelli on how to structure a weekend, not necessarily on how to go racing. We know he's perfectly capable of sort of producing lap time from a car, but I think when it comes to putting together the long weekend that Formula One is, when you compare it to sort of what he's experienced up to this point, which is FRECA and then Formula Two, there's sort of two very different weekend setups compared to Formula One. And there's a lot to learn about sort of how to go into an FP1 session, how to go through FP2, how to go through FP3, what the engineers are going to be looking for in those sessions as well. And what we've seen over the past sort of 14 races and some of those sprints as well, which jumbles it up further, is the fact that Antonelli is still having to learn how to sort of put together these weekends, how to go through sort of the tire sort of testing sort of session of FP2 to figure out long run patterns, to figure out cooling setups, to figure out qualifying run patterns, how to sort of optimize the car to run it in traffic or to go counter to traffic for qualifying. And there's all these sort of little quirks to an F1 weekend that it just feels like no one's told Antonelli about, and they just sort of go, "You're the Wunderkind. You can get lap time out of the car. Off you go." And it's sort of come back to bite them. And you'd like to think that Mercedes have been a bit smarter than that, but the results would say otherwise. And they've got Bottas on hand, and both he and Russell have spent a lot of time working with Kimi to sort of give him tips and feedback. But I think there needs to be a more dedicated position to help him construct these weekends. Otherwise, it's not necessarily going to get any better, or certainly not anytime soon. I fear that it might get worse until it eventually gets better and someone realizes it needs to.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree. I don't know what exactly though, Jesse. Like, what is it? Is it on the technical? Surely it's on the technical, right? On the actual driving. Um,
That's the
but
thing.
then, like I say, yeah,
It's got to be the technical. So Kimi Antonelli is a guy that can quote you any lap time that he's previously done in a race. He's got this fantastically analytical, data-driven mind, and you've got to then beg the question: are Mercedes not giving him the time with the data? They're not giving him the access that he needs, the chance to sit down and pore over it to figure out what's gone wrong in his language, which is the numbers, it's the detail. Is there sort of a clash between the way that Kimi operates and the way that Mercedes currently operate, or want to make him operate? I think there's a hang up there potentially as well.
mm.
Is
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it. Yeah, again, I'm too far away. Yeah, it's obviously on the technical side, and then I always say the technical has mental mindset downstream implications as well. Now that you're in the rut, technically, now you're like the self-confidence, the self-doubt, all that starts to go away and creep in, and then it makes it harder to pull yourself out technically as well. But I guess what I'm asking is, I'm not sure if it's in the braking, if it's in the high speed, if it's in street circuits or tire prep, or like it just. Yeah, it's a technical sport, so yeah.
I think the silver lining he can take from it is that even if he's not figured out what's going wrong on the technical side of it, you say that that obviously can then transfer into the mental side of things. I think he needs to remind himself that he's already been on a podium at a track he's never raced at before. He did some phenomenal racing early on in the season. And even though we all know this, we keep saying it, he is a rookie and he's only 18 and he's in a Mercedes. He's not doing too badly, all things considered. And you could say the same with Hadjar later on. He's in a bit of a rut at the moment. But the fact that we're a little bit disappointed in these guys just shows how impressive that they are and how good that they've been doing so far this season. So that you would hope would be the little bit of confidence that they would need to go, okay, yeah, it is. It's nothing I'm doing mentally that's being of detriment to me. It's something technical. It's something with the car that just hasn't been figured out yet. But there is a solution. We just need to find it. It's not something that's unsolvable. It's not me doing this to myself, you know. And hopefully that is someone pointing that out for both of them and going,
Mm.
right, now we just need to go and pour over the data and have a nice montage where we figure everything out.
So, I mean, for a rookie to jump in a top team, wasn't Hamilton the last person to do that, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Pretty
I think
much.
So, I mean,
Verstappen had a
Max
bit of time to bed in
had
first.
time.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, it's hard, and like what Hamilton did was exceptional, but he came in with so much. He was a massive force of nature when he came in. He came in with so much confidence, and they changed the regs in '07, and he just was able to take advantage and jump in, and the car was all oversteer and he loved it, and he could drift those skinny tires. It was his style. And like those guys just come along once in a blue moon, like to plug Kimmy in and expect, like I think what you said to him, like with the expectations of plugging in like Bortoleto and letting him just work it out. And now he's doing
Well,
amazing. And
again,
with
you'd have
Kimmy,
the
it was
same thing
like,
if you
yeah,
flipped it. If you put Bortoleto in the Mercedes and put Kimi in
that's
the
right.
Sauber, you'd have
Exactly.
the exact same
Correct.
storyline but flip. And you go, oh,
Yeah,
strange how that's perfectly acceptable for Antonelli now, but it's not acceptable for Bortoleto.
correct.
yeah, it is the pressure of a top team, and
Mm.
pressure of the top team is something that doesn't seem to just impact, say, rookies. Red Bull, Verstappen somehow still third in the drivers' championships, with Sonoda a worrying P18, which puts him below quite a few other drivers at far lower ranked teams as it stands. Team, I'll let you kick off.
Yes. I'm not going to go too much into the Yuki stuff because we've done quite a bit of that already this season. Um, but I do think that Japan in particular was definitely one of Verstappen's best ever pole laps, but then also one of his best ever victories, I think. And it's a bit remarkable that it comes in a year where you've got all of this other stuff going on at Red Bull, and he's just able to still pull that one out of the bag. And a little bit like Russell, I wouldn't be surprised if we get another win or two out of him this season, either on just random merit that happens at a circuit that we're not expecting. I'm thinking like Singapore or Mexico, somewhere random, or but I think the thing is, he said he's going to be surprised if that happens. But I think the fact that none of us would be just shows that what we know he's capable of in that car. And to go back to the three-pronged approach I was saying earlier about success, I think the car, yeah, we've talked to death about it, is definitely tailored more towards automatics. But I think the interesting thing with Yuki is that they obviously put him in as a replacement for Liam because they thought, well, rookie after two races, which is a whole other kettle of fish, is not doing the job. We'll put an experienced driver in his fifth season now. That all sorted out. Didn't sort it out at all. What was interesting was that after one race, he was then in the points regularly for a while, and then has had this drop off, which you'd be expecting it the other way round, if anything, because you'd go, okay, he needs to take a minute to learn the nuances of the Red Bull. It's obviously going to be different from the Racing Bulls, but then he'll go on this upward trajectory. Whereas the reverse seems to have happened, which is quite interesting and leads to another tantalizing what if they'd kept Lawson in the car or retained Perez, because arguably at the very least it wouldn't have made too much difference. So what's the harm in developing a new driver in Lawson or keeping the old driver in Perez? But either way, you'd be hard pressed to say they could be doing much worse considering who's behind Tsunoda at the moment in the championship. It's not a massive list of drivers, and at the current rate it's going, wouldn't be surprised to see Behrman jumping over him before the end of the season. Colapinto probably a bit more of a stretch. Then again, Alpine can do miraculous things about once every 6 months, so who knows? But yeah, that's what's just so interesting is the dynamic at play with that second seat in the car, because they've got a team, and yeah, it's crumbling a little bit, but they haven't forgotten how to do a Grand Prix weekend. They're just not as good at it, but that's fixable, but it's still not completely fallen apart. And they've got people in charge who know what they're doing. Yeah, they're going through some turmoil, but that's still there. The car, also not perfect, but we've seen that you can get points out of it. We've seen that you can get near it with Lawson, and we know what Max can do with it. We're not obviously expecting the second driver, whoever that is, to do what Max is doing, but you know there's scope, and so you're just left with the driver, and that's why they should have at least left Lawson a bit longer before chucking him out. I mean, it's such unfair when you look at Australia and go, didn't even finish that. A bunch of drivers didn't, and then a P12, which was also higher than Yuki did in that race, bearing in mind, and we're going to chuck him out and replace him with the guy that he finished ahead of to achieve square root of essentially Sardou. So it continues to be perplexing, but that seems to be Red Bull this year.
Yeah, I agree. Max has done some amazing qualifying performances. Yeah, like Suzuka was exceptional. I wasn't that surprised by, let's say, Silverstone. I mean, they trimmed all the wing off. If you look at the data, he's just cleaning it down the Hanger Straight and the Wellington Straight. And yeah, he held it together in the critical corners, but you know, they did
Almost all of
take
the
a
time.
gamble. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like Max, and I'll be talking about this in my preview before Netherlands. Max in the high speed, and when I say downforce is significantly active, like your Belgiums, your Silverstones, your Suzukas and stuff, he's excellent. I just feel like he's a bit clumsy in his technique in the slow speed. I don't think he likes it. I don't think the car likes it. And in particular, long corners of constant radius, like where we have a lot in Hungary, Netherlands as well. I just feel like he's not as good in those as he is in like Austin S's, for example. He's just spectacular through that high section. But it always gets the car always gets the blame because Max is perfect. Do you know what I mean? So I just feel like he's a little bit under his usual excellent self in the likes of those corners. But Max has been obviously excellent this year. With the second car, I just think the preparation, like the drivers they're not coming in prepared. Again, similar to what we spoke about, like the prep needs to be done for the rookies, not even rookies, but to come in and not fall into the valley of despair, like how do you, I just feel like there's bigger problems with the nurturing of the drivers as opposed to the car or once they get to Red Bull, it's like they're not because they're firing in so many drivers at that second seat and it's not working. So I don't think it's the drivers at this point. I think it's their prep, how they're nurtured into that seat. Do you know what I mean? Like given the right tools and information to be able to problem solve and dig yourself out of trouble is the skill. I think that's lacking. Identify, where the struggle is, solve for it, identify how the car handles, solve for it. Like they haven't been given that
And like you
sort of
say, it's not even just the rookies. You saw that with Perez last year, but you see it with Yuki this year, and
yeah,
you go, just because they've got the experience
yeah,
doesn't mean that they're the same level of experience as other drivers, let's say. Like, not even looking at
yeah,
the Max and Lewis's of the grid, you look at Sainz, you look at Leclerc as some of the more experienced but stronger driver, and you go, just because you're experienced doesn't mean you're that level. And we were debating the caliber of driver that Yuki is after Budapest, I think, and going, yeah, fifth season and knows how to do a lot of the basics. But if you don't have the team support, like you say, or if you don't have it in the right way and you're not willing to, or not thinking to work with them in preparing in a different way to what they used to, or however they need to do it in their own language, then it's ultimately not going to work. And we obviously don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know how much Yuki's talking to XYZ people about trying to sort it out, if he's even doing that, or if he's going, well, I'll just figure it out by myself, or,
yeah. Who
we don't
knows?
know a lot of these things, but it's just interesting that they still seem ignorant of the fact that they can't just throw any old driver in there and go, it'll be fine now.
So I think, yeah,
Um,
surely by now,
and
yeah. But I guess Lewis is struggling with this to an extent as well, right? The whole dig yourself
true,
out of trouble piece.
but he's
And
he's he's able
Lewis,
to be
Lewis,
proactive with it, I think, as well, and as he's got the weight he can throw around with it, whereas Yuki, I think, he's the only experienced driver on the group without a podium to speak of, and
hmm,
that he's kind of lost go. He's been around, but he's not reached the same levels as a lot of people would have done by this point, and that's fine because not everyone's going to achieve that. But I don't think that's how you then measure how much support you give the driver either. And if you're Laurent Mackey and you're saying that he's going to be in the car for the rest of the season, then surely you want him to get some results. So otherwise, what's the point in leaving him in the car for the rest of the season? You chuck someone else in and hopefully support them instead. So I think they just need to figure out what the hell they're doing there and just understand that Yuki is fine as a driver, but he's probably peaked, and that peak wasn't that high, and that's fine. But you just need to support the drivers as possible so that whatever outcome you want for this season and beyond this season is then fulfilled. And just make peace with that because you're also a team who's not used to not winning. You've been doing it for so long. And now you need to take the same pill that Ferrari potentially should have taken a few years ago now and go, stop a second. You're going to have to reassess everything. Otherwise, you're going to end up back in 2005 and you're starting from real scratch again. And you don't want to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick at Red Bull. I think, yeah, Verstappen, much like Russell, there's so little to say. He's sort of done pretty much everything you need of him this season, but we've seen a few more of those sort of clumsy moments, potentially where the car is almost devolving. It's sort of masking Max's errors a bit less. And that's where we're starting to sort of notice those moments where sort of Max's sort of weaknesses in certain sectors start to creep in, like Martin said. The Sonoda one, the Red Bull approach to just everything, I think is a huge question. And I'm prepared to give them a lot of time just to figure it all out. Now they've got sort of fresh leadership at the top. They're changing a lot of things. If you've kept your finger on the pulse for sort of like the amount of job openings that have been going through Milton Keynes at the moment, it's huge. And while, yeah, it's a big campus, 80 job applications is relatively small in the sort of grand scheme of things, but it's not behind the scenes people as well. There's a lot of important technical roles that have sort of come up onto the market. You've got
I have
to
to get my hands dirty.
you've got to start thinking that they're reforming and restructuring to a very new outfit. And they've got Ford coming on board for next season with new power plants. There's this season, a bit like how we're treating Ferrari with this season, is sort of just a bit of a wipeout season. I think we could possibly level that same argument for Red Bull and just sort of give them a year, let them figure out new team principle, new structure, get everything set, and hopefully they go for a bit of stability with this driver lineup, just at least into next season, so we can just figure out what that car is doing, because there is no way you're going to get a clear read on a car with just one driver across a season. You need the two same drivers giving it their all for a season to figure out exactly what this new, very different technical regulation comes out like.
The last thing I'll say on that is that you think you got it there, but Red Bull might not, is you're willing to give them the time to figure things out. Red Bull might not be willing to give themselves a long time to figure things out because they want a quick fix and haven't learned yet that you can't have a quick fix for everything. I think that's going to be the crucial point.
Yeah, difference in opinion between me and Red Bull as to how Red Bull should treat themselves. Meanwhile, in fifth still, somehow, Williams, Alex Albon currently sitting P8 in the Drivers' Championship, while Carlos Sainz P16, not quite as strong a performance.
A little bit like Mercedes, Albon, pretty good form, not much to say about him. He had the 3 DNFs, but aside from that, pretty on the money for the most part, and a lot more comfortable against Sainz than many of us probably predicted going into the season. Sainz struggling a lot more than expected. I'd love to know what's going on there because it's not too clear. But I think P5 at the moment, after being P9 at the end of last year, is just brilliant for the team. And so I can somewhat obviously say it's the benefit of having two good drivers, even if one of them struggles a little bit. So who knew? If you have two drivers, you can do fairly well. There is a solution. If you don't just have a Max Verstappen, you can just get two other good drivers and it will work out maybe. Madness.
I was listening to Alex's podcast with, I think it was Tom Clarkson with F1, and he was talking about the driver coach, having a driver coach, and which he hasn't had for a while, and how much it's helped him. And I think one thing that he said that was really important was some teams do it where the performance engineer also covers that role of driver coach. So performance engineer is car performance engineer, but also driver performance. And if they see opportunities for lap time, they'll just call it out. Whereas Alex has that separate. He's got his performance engineer and a driver coach. So driver coach is working on driving technique, performance engineer is working on car performance, and together I reckon that's a killer combination. I don't know how many other drivers have that setup that they run with. I know Lando doesn't. Jarv is his performance engineer, acts as a driver coach as well. I think it would help massively. And Alex said he hasn't had that driver coach for a while, but he also said like he's finding it really valuable as well. It's not something he sounds like I want to get rid of this setup. So yeah, I'll be curious to know like how many other, whether that's the same, mirrored the same on Carlos's side, who these driver coaches are and who their performance engineers are and how it's working up and down the grid. I know like Lewis, for example, wouldn't have something like that. So I think that's a big factor in helping Alex because he's getting input from the two most important people on the driving, from the car side and from the driving side. And you take it or leave it, the driver coach can just point out things that you can't see when you're hurling around the world at 300 kilometers an hour. Do you know what I mean? So you've got a lot to worry about. And so having someone say, just clean this up, and I think it would be very helpful. So yeah.
I think, Williams is an odd one to get a read on, but I think the way they're moving as a team, their performance as a unit as a whole has been absolutely phenomenal, where they've built into this season and continue to build on it as well. Albon's performance, I think, is hugely reflective of the effort he's putting in, the way he's structured sort of a department around him to keep him sort of not necessarily motivated, but sort of driven, focused, and able to sort of build on things personally. And I think Sainz will hopefully follow what seems to have been sort of a good lead and will be able to sort of maybe take the same steps himself and start sort of turning that around and working it for him. But I think my only real concern was they were one of the first teams to turn off the development of this car to start focusing on 2026. I don't know how long that's going to pay off for them. Well, yes, they'll come into 2026 with a very nicely developed car. there is also going to be the question of could they have extricated a bit more or extracted a bit more from this season if they'd just sort of waited another round or two just to sort of take out a few more of the rough edges of this chassis. But nonetheless, it's a great season for Williams. And again, when you compare it to where they've been for the past 7 years, possibly more, this is a really good outcome. So I think as it stands, this is a solid effort by halftime.
I think it's a little
I
bit
think the
like
car's
Aston
really
Martin.
good. Yeah, I was just going to say, Tim, the car's really good. Like, I think there have been times where it's like I thought in Hungary it was really good as well. Just the way it hooked up the final corner had so much nice front end grip. So I think it's a really good car as well.
I think it's a little bit like Aston Martin that we'll talk about in a second. They're clearly focused on next year, and it is a gamble because obviously if it works, you look brilliant. You go, well, it was worth sacrificing 25 for because you come out the gates, you're in the points regularly, you're on the podium, you've won a race, da 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 da. But if it doesn't pan out, then you go, well, what on earth did you spend last year doing, and why are you not developing the car? And I think that's why Williams and Aston Martin in particular are going to be the possibly the most interesting teams to watch next year from that midfield pack because both have been around for a long time. Both have drivers that have been around for a long time. In theory, they know what they're doing. So to see how this gamble for both of them pays off is going to be quite fascinating. And I think, yeah, with Williams, like I say, you'd take it for now because it's so much better than how they have been doing. But we as neutral fans just want them to keep that going. So you don't want them to compromise themselves unnecessarily and go, no, just make hay while the sun shines and we'll forgive you if 26 is a little bit slow in places because at least we had 25. So yeah, bit of a slow burn that we won't find out about until probably around this time next year, annoyingly.
Yeah, possibly the same for Aston Martin, who sit just below them in the constructors' standings and have two closely bunched drivers when it comes to the Drivers' Championship as well. Alonso P11, Stroll P12.
Where do you
Personally,
start with this team, huh?
so I mean, I'm just excited for Adrian Newey Alonso combination next year. Like, I think that's what Fernando's been waiting 20 years for this. I think like he moved to McLaren. So McLaren were quick in '05. And Fernando signed with McLaren at the end of '05, I remember. And then where did Adrian? He went to Red Bull pretty soon after that, '06, '07, didn't
Mm,
he? That's when he, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, Fernando's been waiting for this for so long. That's the reason he moved to McLaren, was just to drive an Adrian Newey car.
So we know who
Um,
to blame for Alonso's career stagnating after 2006, basically.
yeah, because obviously the '05 car was unreliable, but it was really quick. I was watching the season highlights of that last night. It was a really good season. So much stuff happens, like mechanical failures, and Montoya got taken out by back markers. It's a really good season. So I recommend just going back and just watching how F1 used to be. Like it was so different. Anyway, I'm just excited for that. I want to see, like, I'm sure he's ready for it. He's doing what we said Ferrari should do. He's getting everything ready so that when the car comes good, he'll be on.
Fernando
Yeah.
as a driver in terms of rep and everything, he is like the samurai that he keeps kind of emulating in his various sponsorship deals and watch creations. He's got all of that nailed down, it feels like, and he just needs the tools now to be given
Yeah.
to him and go, right, I can do it. And you saw glimpses of that in 23. And you go, well, he's still got it. And you saw it even Hungary last time out, P5 after his 44th birthday, and everyone going, oh, well, he's definitely had to pass it now. And he goes, yeah, about that. I've not been informed that that's what has to happen here. So I'm just going to go and stick it in the top five in this arguably quite terrible car because I can, because I'm Fernando Alonso. Um, Stroll, I mean, he's Stroll. He wakes up occasionally and remembers he's a Formula One driver and he can do it occasionally, but again, he does this really amusing thing of 2 or 3 times a year, you'll get a half decent result, and the more generous uh, commentators will go, well, he did all right, and you go, yeah, but is that enough to justify him keeping his seat? Because if that was any other driver, I mean, Christ, how long would he have survived at Red Bull, for example, or Alpine, you know? And for a driver that's been around what 9 years now and is going to enter his 10th year next year, you do
I have
wonder about that, and it's so frustrating because you just think, just Rogovic, just for a season. I just want to see what he can do. Just all of these young rookies, just to see. Mitch for a season in a decent car, Rogovic in a decent car, Pocher, if anyone ever remembers where he went. All these drivers where there was so much potential.
Yeah, Djokovic is really good. I highly rate the way he talks about driving. Like I just feel like he knows what he's
Frustrates
doing
you more than me.
when he talks. Yeah, I like Djokovic. Just the way he frames problems, talks about driving. Alex Brundle the same. Like I just feel like these guys are on another level. I have a question for you guys. Like with Hamilton, everyone talks about age a lot, and it must have a implication, that it's either reaction time or it's cognitive ability or vision or risk. Like there's something in there. Like, but then you've got, and no one really talks about it, like forgets like Fernando's there as well in his 40s. And like, do you guys, I guess my question is like, do you guys see that age having an implication with Lewis, but not having an implication with Fernando? Or do you see it having an implication on both of them? Personally, I'm not sure. Like with Fernando, I don't think age is impacting him at all. I think he's getting better with age. Whereas with Lewis, I don't think it's an age thing. But I want to know whether you
I,
guys think age is a factor for Lewis specifically.
I don't think it's an age thing, just looking more broadly, because I'm, again, going to my other main passion line of IndyCar, and you see some of the older drivers there, and it's not impacting them at all. I mean, you've got Scott Dixon, who's, I think, the same age, if not slightly older than Alonso, and he just won a race a few rounds ago on pretty much merit. And he's won, I think, every single season he's been competing over the last 20 years. So it's clearly not having too much of a negative impact on him in terms of how he performs. I think with Lewis and Alonso, it's interesting because obviously you've got 5 world championships separating them, and Alonso perhaps gets a little more leeway because the expectation's not as high. And also he's had these periods where, I say period, quite a lot of periods and quite consistent periods where he appears to have jumped ship at just the wrong time. I think leaving Alpine was probably the only good thing he's done because they didn't get any better, at least, whereas every other team, it feels like it's gotten better about 2 minutes after he left the door, and you go, it feels a bit personal at this point. Whereas Lewis, I think he's got such a strong but different way of approaching everything how Fernando does. I was saying that Fernando's got this, let's say, samurai outlook on everything. Lewis has got that same calm mentality, but he takes it a lot more personally, it feels like. That's how it comes across anyway. And I think his problem is more mental with himself because the expectation he puts on himself. I don't think he cares too much about what other people think. He just beats himself up because he knows what he's capable of and what he's done before. Whereas Alonso, I think, has that more rounded movement approach. Definitely in recent times, I think ever since Mercedes started dropping off a bit in 22, it's been a struggle for Lewis to figure out, is it the car? How much of it is split percentage wise? How do we figure this out? And now he's having it all over again with Ferrari. And I don't think the age comes into it. I think he probably get a little bit slower with age just because of how nature works. But I don't think I think it's stuff that if you're a driver of their caliber, you can drive around that. And you see that in certain races. Again, you saw that in IndyCar last weekend with the last 25 laps of the race there. 2 drivers, you'd arguably say, were quicker and should have been ahead of the eventual winner. But he was able to stay ahead of them, and he's older, he's wiser, he's got all of these capabilities on his side. And I think Lewis just, I think it's just more the mental side at the moment that's stopping him rather than age or ability or anything like that. I don't know if you agree, Jesse.
I think, yeah, I certainly agree. There's possibly sort of the mental hurdle of their own perception of self. But I think a lot of it is also a publicly driven thing. It's this sort of idea of he's Lewis Hamilton, he's sort of Mr. Incredible, untouchable, 7 world championships, the greatest of all time. So the moment there's that slip, it's sort of this perceived sort of fall from an even greater height. It's, yeah, everything, every sort of drop off is magnified because of the sort of level at which we've known him to be able to operate, and it makes sort of it easier to criticize or easier to try and point blame because there's this sort of more obvious change. Whereas Alonso, like you said, we haven't seen a sort of we haven't seen Alonso in contention for a world championship since what, 2007, 8, 9, somewhere around that point in time, possibly as late as 2010, 11, maybe.
It's insane that that's a sentence we can say about a guy who's still on the grid.
But yeah, it's been sort of over a decade since we've seen that. We've seen him go off, enjoy other disciplines, come back to the sport, and sort of bounce around from team to team. We've not had, certainly in a modern mindset of the last 8 to 10 years, we've not had this sort of concept of Alonso being a driver that's supposed to be up there and supposed to be performing at that point. And it's sort of, you then forget that he's sort of 44. I know Scott Dixon is actually even a year older, but yeah, you sort of go Alonso, yeah, 44. I think it's just possibly people don't want to accept that Ferrari have done something wrong, that maybe Lewis made the wrong choice of going to Ferrari. It's possibly just easier for people to sort of go, oh, Lewis is over the hill, he's out to pasture, he's old. And then sort of forgetting that you've still got Alonso, who 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago was scrapping for podiums in a mid-tier Aston Martin. You sort of go, okay, scratch that. So it's.
I think as well the other bit is that Alonso is. I think he's definitely got the confidence now down. He blames the tools, so that when he does get on the podium or does get a good result, he loves it so much and he has that appreciation for it. Whereas I think if Hamilton, after the last time out, even if he got on the podium, you go, that's a great step forward, but he's still not satisfied with it. He can't take that glory in the same way that Alonso can, and he wants that win, and that's a very interesting way of approaching it. But I think Alonso's probably got the more long term, better version of that at the moment, if only for the sake of his own sanity.
Mm.
Mm. With Fernando is an interesting one. I think '07 was really good for him. I know he lost his seat and Hamilton beat him, quote unquote, because they finished equal on points. And it was all about how amazing Lewis did. But again, because I've been watching it back, and I think it was really good for Fernando because it taught him that adaptability piece. Like, you're not always going to jump in a car where it's just a natural fit for your driving style. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It suited Lewis down to the ground, that '07 McLaren. And therefore, Lewis didn't have to learn. Like, he's only changed teams once in like 15 to 20 years. He hasn't had to learn exactly what I said, the ability, the art of problem solving. Whereas Fernando got that lesson like for free in 2007, then he changed to Renault, then he went to Ferrari, then he went to WEC, and then he's done this and that. And I just feel like whatever he's given, he'll drive it. Whereas Lewis, you can't say the same because he didn't get those lessons early on in his career. The car suited him. Then he walked into that 14 Mercedes, 13 Mercedes, 14 Mercedes, which was very quick. And so he hasn't, the ability to problem solve and dig yourself out of trouble is huge. It means you're always going to be at the front and applying pressure on your teammate. So I think that was good for Fernando. When you look at it like it was Lewis's rookie year, yes. But you've got to look at it from Fernando's side. They changed tyre from, I think it was Bridgestone to Michelin to Bridgestone. The car didn't suit him at all. Hamilton came in with all of the self-confidence in the world, and then Alonso still got equal points. Like, it was also a good effort from Fernando in a car that didn't suit him naturally. So it's like what we're looking at now with Lando Oscar as well. I don't think this McLaren naturally suits Lando. Yeah.
You touched on one of my favorite points about Lewis is, this sounds wrong to be criticizing him, but it's adaptability. And when you look at the fact that you can take Max Verstappen, chuck him in most cars, and he's able to very quickly get lap time out of it. I'd say the same with Fernando Alonso. We saw him sort of very quickly get up to speed in WEC. We saw him able to sort of quickly get his feet under the table, at least when it came to doing IndyCar for the Indy 500. There are certain drivers that have this adaptability to different sort of styles of racing, different forms of racing. And potentially when it comes to bouncing between teams, that's what's always kept Fernando Alonso afloat, was this ability to quickly jump into a car, understand how it feels, why it feels the way it feels, and then how to find the way through that. And we've seen that a bit with George Russell as well. He grew up at Williams with an absolute pig of a car year on year on year, gets to Mercedes and they've had a duffer, but he's able to make that work because he's used to having to sort of work with a team to develop a car, to find ways around the flaws, to try and extricate lap time. But as soon as you're, and this again sounds like a sort of a bad criticism of Lewis, as soon as you're so used to having a good car year on year on year, the moment you're given a slightly off one, you haven't got that skill set that's able to sort of find the solutions to the problems that it throws up. And that's sort of an interesting trait that I've sort of you start to spot in drivers, and sort of goes along with what you said, is sort of having that tool set to find your own solutions to problems.
It's very important. With Lewis, it's interesting because there was a stat like that he'd won a race every single year he'd been in F1 up until recently, right? So it's
Uh,
like, has he
22.
lost 22? Yeah. So he's won in cars that you could argue either weren't good, but maybe they suited him.
hmm.
So I don't know whether he's lost a bit of adaptability as well. Like if he won in the '09 McLaren, which wasn't good, or the
And
13
it goes back to that
Mercedes.
mentality, I think, because 22 obviously came at an awkward time for the car, but also came after a heck of a year, let's say. And
That's right as well. Yeah.
you had the new regs, you had the adaptability there, and 23, obviously, no one bar Sainz was able to do anything against Red Bull. Mercedes was still in the rut with their car and everything, but then last year you saw that convergence start with the regulations, and Lewis had a car that wasn't the best, but again, a little bit amusingly, like Russell was able to use that to his advantage. So he's able to adapt. And I just don't think he's, like you say, he's just not had as much experience as that as, say, Alonso has. But also, it speaks for me then to being more of a mental thing with him rather than it being the cars as the primary issue. It goes back to what we were saying about Ferrari earlier. I'd rather you have a bit of a duck car that you can still figure out rather than duck communications in the team or in yourself, because that's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out on the fly.
Mm, mm. A question I get a lot is, will the new regs suit Lewis? And I'm always like, it'll be a
Hopefully,
step in the right direction. Yeah, I think a step in the right direction. Slightly lighter, slightly smaller tires. Yeah, it'll be a step in the right direction, but I still think it's not. Lewis is going to have to do his step in the right direction as well.
Hmm. I think the final point on it is 2022 was a tricky year for Lewis because he had sort of come into it. I don't think he came into it fired up off the loss of 21. I think he was, if anything, broken, and then it was
Yeah.
down on by the fact that this huge regulation change had changed the car completely away from his driving style. And all of a sudden, he's sort of got these two insurmountable things to try and come past. At the same time, his closest rival is now storming off into the distance. Ferrari came into 2022 firing on all cylinders. Everyone else seemed to have absolutely nailed it. And he was sort of left with these two great hurdles to overcome. So I think
And a really good teammate
a
in
really good teammate
George.
all of a sudden, yeah. And he's sort of got so much.
makes you wonder if he'd joined Ferrari in 22, what he could have done with that car before things started tailing off with the regs, as it were. That would have been quite interesting. We need a what if series at some point.
Yeah. Mind you, we had for such a long time had a what if, and we finally got an answer to it in the first half of this season, which is of course Nico Hulkenberg making it to the podium, Kick Sauber having a relatively all right time of things, currently up at seventh in the constructor standings, Hulkenberg ninth, Bortoletto P17, though that isn't a reflective result of his last few races, I'd say, for Gabriel.
Not much to say here, I feel like, other than what a pleasant surprise this team has been. It feels like such a breath of fresh air, particularly after last year. I think Hulkenberg scored more points in this first race with the team than the entire team did all of last season. I think that was already a bit of a, okay, this could be interesting sort of a season. Um, I'm just really happy for Hulkenberg because him and Haas last year looked like a really good combination finally coming to fruition, and you go, oh, he's going to be the one to stay there, help build that team up and take them to places. And then it switches to what we saw last year was this horrendous team, and you go, oh, why, Nico? Why did you do this to yourself? And it's worked out so nicely for him. And as I was saying earlier, him and Bortoletto, they know the relationship dynamics there, what the team is trying to build towards in the future. They know how to work together. They're figuring out as they go. And it's got these very year one sort of vibes to it for me. And well, we find ourselves, I think, all of us caring a lot more about this team and these drivers than we would have predict before the start of the season. And yeah, Bortoletto, I think we touched on it earlier with Antonelli. I think because of the car, because of the team, not much was expected of him, despite him being the reigning F2 champion. So the fact he's been able to buy himself more time to get up to speed, which I think is crucial for rookies to get, and especially when there is a bit of an expectation. But he's coming into his own as well now, so it's just really pleasant to see, and you like this underdog story, and I can safely say without any kind of hint of sarcasm anymore that I genuinely quite like their livery as well. So I get to say that as a bonus point to the stuff that they're doing positive over a weekend, not just as something to say.
I think one thing to note on Gabby is he seems to be good friends with Max and can lean on Max's experience, which even if it's a little bit here and there, I truly think it's invaluable because again, digging yourself out of trouble is very important. And if Max can just give you the answer to the exam question that you're looking for, like an example might say, Gabby might say, I'm really struggling with the tires, and Max might say, yeah, this is what you need to do. That's helpful, man. That's
You feel
really
like Max is just sitting
helpful.
there at the sim and Portolator just comes in and asks him this question. He doesn't even look away. He goes, yeah, it's this. Thanks. And just leaves the room again.
Mm,
Usually
that's
they're both
really
on the sim at the same
helpful.
time on voice chat, solving
Oh,
these
yeah.
problems as is. But yeah, I think also potentially sort of stretching the theory a little bit, but with the amount of brain drain that Red Bull have seen and the fact that they've had fair few sort of bods from Red Bull move over to Sauber for the Audi project, there's sort of this ability for Max to sort of tell Bortoletto things, and Bortoletto can relay this to a team that will immediately understand it because it's exactly the same things they've heard from Max 2 years previously. So there's this sort of great ability that there's this sort of communication and support within it that maybe Red Bull don't like that Max is sort of pilfering their information and sort of shipping it via another driver to Sauber. But certainly when it comes to like sort of setup and driver coaching, at least in that aspect, I'm not suggesting that Max is stealing technical information and sort of supplying it through sort of like game platforms. But no, there's when it comes to sort of coaching,
Farming simulator.
yeah, coaching is sort of his friends on the grid, sort of on how to do better. I think it's a side that no
Yeah.
one ever really anticipated to see from Verstappen. So it's really nice to see it. But at the same time, the result we've seen in Bortoletto across the season, the way that he's improved, also shows that there is sort of something unique in the way that Max is able to transfer information and sort of tell people and coach things, as well as Bortoletto's ability to notice where his flaws are, notice where the issues are, ask the right questions, and then put to practice the answers that he gets as well. So it tells two brilliant stories from both sides.
Mm. It's really good from Gabby to reach out, to nurture that relationship. I think it's got something to do with Max's partner side being Brazilian as well, with the whole PK thing. And then with Gabby, there's some sort of like some sort of natural relationship there, or they're just friends from elsewhere. But I was going to say, do you think Max helps Gabby Bortoletto in the Sauber more than he helps Sonoda?
I would
Yes.
be honest, yeah, because
his his teammate?
maybe
Well,
obviously there'll be sort of like
there's less harm in helping out a rookie in a back marker
There's less
team, let's
downside.
face it,
Yeah.
than trying
Mm.
to help the teammate who, if he gets up to speed, you've then got to compete with in a team where you're already the dominant force and they've been able to see everyone else off. If you want to look at it cynically, which I guess I just did.
yeah. Well, I mean, what he has done is he's helped Bortoletto to the point that Bortoletto stands ahead of his teammate in the driver's stand.
Yeah.
So he's proven to
See,
be.
this is why I should get Vito and who we put in the car, guys. It's clearly not going to be you, kid.
But yeah, I think that obviously I think there'll be sort of data sharing within Red Bull. There'll be the sort of post-race debriefs, the engineering meetings where there will be those conversations, those sort of transferences of idea, of theory, of feel. But then when you look at sort of the conversations and the relationship that Gabriel has with Max, and the fact that they're both open about the fact that they have these sort of conversations, sort of how to get over hurdles within the sport, not necessarily ones around driving, but potentially just other bits as well. I think
Mm.
it's one of the sort of sweeter stories out of the season. Just sort of, it's nice. But yeah, when it comes
It
to actually,
reminds me a bit of Joe and Bottas in Brazil a couple of years ago when he was driving behind Joe and coaching him how to get past Latifi in real time during the Grand Prix. And you go, that's nice. You're clearly not going to get very far with this because of the car and the team and everything. But it's nice that you're working together at this point and seeing that dynamic at play.
yeah, I think overall though for Sauber, it's been a really interesting first half of the season, and I was sort of having this conversation with James Vowles at Festival of Speed. I was like, do you think a lot of this is down to the fact that they've now got Mr. Wheatley on board? Has he changed things around, or has this been something that's boiling away for a bit longer? And he said, I think it's six of one, half a dozen of the other. I think that Jonathan has come in and immediately shaken up things and really cemented the practice of a weekend and how they organize things. But a lot of this is something that Sauber had been trying to build up to themselves. They just needed the final piece to fall in. And it sort of so happens to have been Mr. Wheatley arriving and sort of going, look, this is how to run things as sort of military tight, absolutely clean precision. And it's the little bits that have started to really add up now for Sauber. And as a result, we're seeing those more regular points finishes. With Sauber out of the way, we'll rattle on through the final three teams as we've been going for nearly an hour and a half now. Racing Bulls have had an up and down season. They've got Hajar in P13 and Lawson in P15.
I'd say it's more of an up season, to be honest, when you think about everything going on in the big picture. You've got two rookies coming in, and one of which is switched into the team after two Grand Prix, and who has to then rebuild himself because Red Bull have been even more unceremoniously brutal than usual. And in return, we've gotten, I think, a couple of great storylines. One being rookie bouncing back from the very early disappointment of Australia and dealing with Marco accordingly, and combining that with, for me and you, I think Jesse, at least rewriting his character from his Formula 2 days. Then on the other hand, you've got Lawson, who's showing that he's earned his place in Formula 1. He's taken a bit of time to build up, a little bit like Bortoletto, and I wonder if there would have been less criticism for him at the start of the season had he not had those races in the previous couple of seasons here and there. And like goes back to what I was saying about Red Bull, it may well not made it any different, but it wouldn't have done any harm to keep him at Red Bull. So the fact that he's been able to shake those cobwebs off, finish higher than the guy who replaced him at the top team, and be ahead of him in the standings, and be not a million miles away from Hajar, and not a million miles away from a bunch of other drivers in the championship. It's great to watch and gives us something really interesting to talk about as the drivers individually, as them as teammates, and then in the bigger picture of Formula One in 2025. So I think more positive than negative.
Mm.
For me, it's been like with these two guys, they're very different drivers. Isaac's very smooth with the steering. If you watch him, he's like just so progressive with his steering input, so smooth and sweeping. It's very good with these big cars because you just keep aerodynamics nice and stable, keep the weight platform nice and stable, and it works really well. I feel like Lawson's very, it's not as elegant as Isaac's driving.
It
And so
feels
they're
to me,
very
I don't know if you
different
agree,
drivers.
like an off-road racer coming into single seaters.
Yeah, he could
It's like there's a
definitely
bit of
throw
time to learn that
around.
crossover, but I'm enjoying watching that learning process happening. You saw that in China a
Yeah,
lot, I think, with some of his overtakes going to at the end of the long straight. He just kind of, I'm just gonna not quite door bash you, but door bash you essentially, and I'll just maybe,
yeah.
oh no, I didn't get away with it. Damn.
The way you really see this show up is in direction change, like when the cars you're turning right and then you have to turn left, for example, and you just see the transition with Isaac, and it's so like seamless the way he just moves the wheel and pre-warns the car like we're about to change direction. Because with Lawson, it's very much like go that way, no, go that way, and it's very directive. That's probably my only insight that I can give you guys. But yeah, they're very different drivers, massively different.
Mm.
I think it gives a compliment to the car and the team and the drivers as well, though, because if you've got two such different drivers and driving styles, but both being able to get performances out of the car, it shows how the three approaches that I was referring to earlier can come into play and how that success then can build off the top of that.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's an interesting difference between Hajar and Lawson. I think certainly the way that Lawson controls a vehicle is it doesn't wait. He doesn't sort of have the fluidity that you'd expect for sort of single seater formula cars. But at Festival Speed, he was thrown into a rally car and was immediately sort of within I think it was like within half a second of the pace of like the top rally guys on the stage there. And you sort of go, okay, so there's this great transference, but the way that you control and you move a rally car around is incredibly different to a formula car. And potentially that's more where his sort of driving style sort of sits, is more this sort of the way you set up a rally car for a corner a lot sort of earlier before the corner. You've got to get the sort of weight rotating and moving different and moving the weight around in a rally car compared to whereas in a Formula One car, you're trying to keep the weight relatively stable within its own sort of
Correct.
platform. is two
Yeah.
very different ways of moving
Correct.
the car. In a rally car, you're transferring the weight, you're getting it to start rotating before you've even actually got to the corner because you haven't got the traction underneath you. Hadjar, having only grown up with single seaters with go-karting, has got that idea of keeping the weight very much within the wheelbase, within the sort of track of the car. You get a different result, and I think it shows. But at the same time, the Racing Bull is very tractable in the fact that both drivers, with their different styles, are able to achieve points finishes, get it into the top 10, able to get one that pace out of it. They go about it in two very different ways, but the car itself is a far more balanced and neutral platform, and more and more
I'd like
people.
to see them fight a bit more, but actually considering the difference in driving styles, going, okay, we've got two very contrasting things here, but we know the car's good. I'd love to see them fighting for high position somewhere. I don't think we're going to get to see that because if they find themselves in a podium fighting position, team orders are surely going to come into play there. But it'd just be quite fascinating to see, like, say, if you've simply got rally driver then versus single seater, and that's the kind of stuff we want to see because we're always fascinated by what would happen if you did throw one of those if you threw Sebastian Loeb into an F1 car, for example.
Well, I mean, the well, we sort of saw that with Colin McRae. They chucked him into a Benetton back in the 90s, and he took very little time at all to get up to the pace of Martin Brundle. But and we've sort of seen it with Leah Block in Formula One Academy. But when it comes to the Racing Bulls, what I want to know is, could you put Max Verstappen into it, and how quickly would he be able to get lap time out of it?
Mm.
Is the Racing Bulls actually a potentially better car than the RB? Is it because it's a slightly more neutral, balanced platform that it's a better proving ground? There's a lot of questions between the two cars as to not necessarily which set of drivers are better, but which car is better. And it'd be interesting to sort of do a back-to-back test. I love doing it with work when I get to test like two iterations of the same car. You can feel the difference of how the second generation is often better engineered or sort of more pliant in a certain aspect. I'd love to try and sort of drive, if I was able to actually get anything out of driving a Formula One car, the Red Bull versus the Racing Bulls to see what that difference is.
Yeah, I feel like the Red Bull, I still think it's quicker, but I just think the lap time's harder to extract. Um, yeah, I think it's a quicker car, particularly in the high speed. Whereas, like I said before, I think both Max and the Red Bull take a step back in the slow speed. Like I think this weekend in Netherlands, I think they'll be hammered again. So I think there'll be an opportunity for the is it V Carb now? What are they called? Racing Bull.
Everything
Racing Bull.
is.
Yeah. I think there's an opportunity for them again to get in there and they'll be close to Max. Yeah, I'm going to speak to this more, but I think Max has a problem with slow speed corners.
But that's
I remember like Baku, for example, like Checo was always super close in those traction zones. And, I think Max just hates those tracks.
yeah,
So
very all
yeah.
about get it, stop, turn it very slowly, and then sort of punt it out again.
Yeah.
It's not
He's,
his style. Yeah,
he's not very patient. Yeah.
yeah. Sort of lead foot. Get down to ninth place, and we've got Haas. Ocon currently sits 10th overall in the driver's standings, and Ollie Behrman P19. Though again, this sort of certainly over the latter half of the first half of the season, the latter or the second quarter rather, it doesn't feel like those results are truly reflective.
No, not at all. I think for both drivers and the team as a whole, night it was cool for them considering what they've been doing at points. I mean, Ocon just keeps pulling out these random ass P5s and P6s from nowhere, and that's how he gets himself into P10 overall. And yeah, Behrman's P19 doesn't reflect a season. He's the only driver that survived the opening melee in Australia out of the rookies, and he did pretty well in Silverstone as well out of all of the rookies again. So he knows how to drive. It's just he's not getting the points with it as often as he should. But at the same time, you look at the results, and he's quite near the money a lot of the time. And should something go wrong, he'll be able to capitalize in the way that Sainz was able to capitalize in China. And I think as a rookie, as a second driver, that's where you want to be from a team perspective. And that's what a lot of teams want from their drivers. If they know they're not going to be regularly in the points, then we at least want you to be in a position where you can capitalize on the opportunities that come your way. As a whole, I think that a little bit like Hicks Albert feels like a prologue to something, or at least the second part to it after Hulkenberg and Magnussen last year really kind of blew the lid off a Haas in a positive way. And I hope that that positive momentum continues because we had some doubts about the lineup and what impact that would have after such a strong season for the team last year. Going, why, why are you fixing what doesn't need to be fixed here? Why are you not trying to keep at least one of the drivers? Why you go for a brand new lineup? But a bit like Sauber, it's worked, and I think the only concern we had with Haas was that you could see with Sauber why they were changing things because it couldn't get too much worse for them. Whereas Haas had a pretty good outing by their standards. So yeah, P9 overall. I think if they finish there this year, it'll probably be their best P9 or their best worst result of their career so far in F1 because we can visibly see every weekend that they're not actually doing that badly.
Yeah, not much to add. Ollie's super quick, but doesn't have the kind of consistency there at the moment. So he'll have to dial that in somehow. But yeah, not much to add. Now there was talk of potentially Ollie going to Ferrari at one point as well. So yeah, I'm
Imagine
not
how
sure.
pissed Carlos would have been if Ollie Behrman replaced him instead of Lewis. Going, really?
Yeah.
That would have been a tricky one to overcome. I think Ocon is found a team where he can sort of get back to being at home and sort of relishing in it. And I think that's why we're seeing the sort of stronger results from Esteban again. We're sort of seeing he's sort of more at home, more comfortable, happier. And that's why when the sort of the situation allows, when the car is there, he's able to extricate, also get those good results from it. And I think Behrman, it will come. Like you said, he's pretty much always on it. There was sort of the running joke that he's always finishing P11. It only takes one little slip further up and he's there. He's ready to do it. But yeah, the consistency.
And Oscar tried helping him last time out with his lock up into turn one with Lando. If he'd just T-boned him, like George said, it would have been brilliant for Behrman. He got some points out of it.
We've been primed for Alonso as well, sneaking him onto the podium. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Haas continue for the rest of the season because they've built up nicely through this sort of first half of the year. I think they've got the chance to sort of sneak in a few more really strong points paying positions, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple of really good ones for Ollie Behrman appear as well, just sort of as odds and sods here and there.
Who I'm looking at in particular for him after what he was able to do in Formula 2 there. That was some quite impressive stuff from him. So if he could get a best result of the season, Baku would be where my money is.
I was
him crashing into a wall now through no fault of his own, but that's just how it happens.
Potentially would see something exciting from him in Kota. I just have a feeling that it's sort of a circuit that has a bit more space for him to play with and gives him the opportunity to sort of feel a bit more comfortable and really start to push it. But we'll see. And then last and possibly by every means least, Alpine. Gasly down in P14 and Franco Colapinto P20. We should probably mention as well Jack Doohan P21, obviously, with no points on the board either.
You know the trifecta I was using earlier? This is a team that has none of those. They've got them all in theory, and I think Gasly is the only saving grace for them at the moment because he is doing what Fernando Alonso did in McLaren Honda in, 17, 18, and just dragging it to places it has no right being. But apart from that, okay, in theory, they've got a team and they've got a car and they've got drivers, but none of it's not a triangle. It's kind of, I don't know what shape they're trying to do with it, but it's not a triangle. And yeah, it's just a shame for Gasly because he's been this midfield driver for so long, but he's got a Grand Prix win, he's got podiums, and you want him to get his shot for at least a season or two. He might be the other Hulkenberg of Nico Hulkenberg's in terms of he just needs that one opportunity with a decent team, with a decent car to show what he's truly capable of. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon, and we may not get that. And the rest of it is just not great, to put it mildly. And I think it goes back to that meme of the dog sitting in the room with the fire blazing all around, going, "This is fine." It just feels like Alpine at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. What about Franco? I mean, what do we do with him?
Put Doohan back in the car.
Put Doohan back in?
Yeah, I just think Doohan should have got a bit more out of it. It's 5 races is hardly better than 2 from what Lawson got at Red Bull. And again, what's Colapinto done to prove he's that much better than Doohan in that time? Not much of anything, really. If he hadn't had those strong results with the Williams, would he have even got a look in the first place? So I think Doohan got short shifted quite badly and deserves to have at least a few more Grand Prix. But again, I'd have preferred that he went all the way to the summer break before they made the swap if they were going to. I think the way they've handled it doesn't quite let Red Bull off the hook for how they did stuff, but it just goes that you're all in bad company together and you all need to think about what you've done.
Yeah, agree. It's very Red Bull-esque, like get one out, put one in, do something back out. What happens with like surely they're not going to carry on with Franco into the future. So
Can't imagine it.
Especially
But then
after
I don't know who replaces him. I don't know who outside of a rookie would voluntarily go there without without some kind of magical incentive as to this is what we're going to do. We're like, really? And what evidence do you have? Just trust us. No, I've been watching you for the last however many years of your 100 race plan, making it to about race 30 and then you reset again.
they're not getting an experienced driver in there. If they want to swap it again, I think their only real option is going to be Paul Aron, especially considering how sort of he's had a lot of FP1 sessions. He seems to be on the money when it comes to sort of pace in the car. I think there's going to be, you'd think there's going to be questions about Colapinto over the summer break, especially after he wrote off a chassis doing tyre testing at Hungaroring. So there's sort of also the question of Alpine of why do you put your rookie out to do tyre testing? What you want is consistency and someone who knows what they're doing. That's probably where you go for Pierre Gasly, someone who's got 8 years experience in the sport. You don't just chuck in the guy that's had like barely a season over two different teams in very odd scenarios and go, right, go on, tell us everything you need to know about these tyres. And you go, okay.
Go back to Imola as well, and there was the interview I think Franco did with someone saying that Flavio told him all he has to do is drive fast, score points, and not crash. And at Imola, he qualifying, he's crashed again, like you say in the tyre test. He's not scored any points, and from qualifying, I think his best qualifying was what P14 last time out, which by definition not fast. And I know it's a very tight qualifying field this year, and the car is not helping him. But again, maybe wrong to expect your driver to drive fast if your car is an Alpine and you're the essential boss of Alpine. So it just everything about how to mishandle teams, drivers, etc., is being done by Flavio, it feels like, and I don't know what the supposed master plan is there, but I think it's got a lot of us stumped because I don't think we can predict what the supposed end goal is here, because it sure as heck isn't winning anything anytime soon.
Yeah, Colapinto's best qualifying was 12th actually, the Canadian Grand Prix,
Yeah.
same weekend that Pierre Gasly qualified 20th. So not entirely certain on how to quite get a read out of that one. But yeah, it's not brilliant. But I mean, Doohan was at least able to qualify 11th for the Bahrain Grand Prix. So he was able to find one lap pace in the car. The problem is that the Alpine blew so hot and
I
cold.
also just feel like Alpine were never interested in keeping him long term, and so didn't put any resources into helping him prepare for a race weekend
yeah.
properly. Like we were talking about earlier, Martin, with other drivers and teams, it just felt like
Mm.
okay, yeah, he's got a contract on paper, but we haven't sorted out the contract with Colapinto as quickly as we'd like, so we'll stick him in, and when it's sorted, we'll just boost him out, and we don't actually want to give him a fair shot at it, and that's just really shitty. And I'm still
Yeah,
bitter
that was
about it.
Yeah, it was inevitable, and Jack was always under pressure, like more pressure than he had to be from the
Hmm.
get-go. It was hard. So, but then you put him back in. You haven't done him any favors by removing him for half the season
Well,
either. You
yeah,
know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like, yeah,
and I wouldn't mind as much if they'd thrown everything behind him and he didn't perform. It's just that, and then, but it's the fact that they've not done that, and then they've held Colapinto to a completely different standard and just let him get away with worse results for a longer period of time. And you go, well, are we are you still trying to make us buy the bullshit, or are you just giving up on the lie yourselves at this point, and you're just trying to paper over those cracks? It just, frustrating.
he's bringing money, that's why.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. Still mad about
you're
it.
allowed you're allowed to get away with more when you bring money. But
Stroll is
eventually
the
your
perfect
time will run
example of
out.
that.
Yeah, but eventually your time will run out. Like he hasn't got endless lives per se.
Not if
Yeah,
it keeps crashing like that. No, with the cost that that's going to bring.
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that rounds out our sort of team rundown. We'll do as we usually do. We'll have our winners and spinners for the first half of the season so far. And Martin, I'll start with your winner, your standout driver or team.
George. I think George is, yeah. And with the whole Max thing dying off now, I think George has got like his power back in a way in the team, like his negotiating power and his value and everything. So not only is he doing good results on track, he's in a good position now
He
to
didn't let the pressure
renegotiate
get
his
to him.
contract. Didn't let that get to him. He's like just head down. And yeah, I've always said like with Ferrari, for example, they got rid of one of their worst drivers. They had Charles and Carlos and they wanted Lewis. And they got rid of Carlos because Leclerc was doing better. And George has taken that approach. Is like, as long as I'm doing the best I can, I've got nothing to worry about. So yeah, like George. Spinner, I haven't given it much thought. I'll come back to me on that one.
Thiemo, I'll go then to your winner at least.
Well, Franco,
We were hoping.
probably.
Ah,
Franco.
okay, easy answer.
Yeah.
Thiemo,
I think Hulkenberg for me for the winner, just because it was such a pleasant surprise to see that be a positive career move for him, before even you get to Silverstone. And obviously Silverstone was the icing on top of the cake. I mean, Christ, how long have we been waiting for that? I mean, which is it's almost the same length as Fernando Alonso's entire career in the sport, is how long he's been waiting for this bloody podium. I did think it'd be quite funny if he started podium quite regularly after that. I just needed that first one to get it going, but that's not quite materialized yet. But the fact that we can't rule that out happening again this season is just brilliant. And yeah, Hulkenberg deserves all the applause, I think, for having the foresight and going, yeah, Audi bring a lot of money and a lot of resources, but that's no guarantee of anything. But he's made it work for himself.
yeah. I think for me, I'm going to go winner Oscar Piastri. I think there's just something really, really clinical and really exciting about the way that he's put together. Actually, there's nothing exciting about the way he's put together this championship so far, and that's the impressive thing. It's been just sort of rigorously organized and just cleanly executed. And I think that getting to see that and just seeing him sort of pull it together weekend after weekend is, from a very technical perspective, fascinating, and I'm really enjoying that. So for me, Oscar Piastri sort of is standout winner, a bit of a sort of Route One choice given he's leading the championship, but at the same time, he's put in the hard graft to get to that point, so worthy of commendation.
He's done very well. Yeah. And only his third year, don't forget, in F1. He's
Yeah,
doing really well.
no mean feat. Spinners,
You say
Martin.
you say Route One. We've all gone very Route One for the spinner, though. From yeah.
Yes, yeah, Martin, you've gone Route One for the spinner. You've gone for Franco Colapinto. Just yeah,
Speaks for itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gone with Franco. I just feel like with the whole Williams thing, like he came in with that, we spoke about it before, they were always going to get rid of Jack for Franco based on Franco's Williams results and then plus the money. Like he done really well and was always going to, he was a force of nature, had all of Argentina behind him, and that's all kind of died off now. And he just continues to make the same mistake. You can't continue to make the same mistake twice. The amount of crashes he's had is, you can't count them all. So he's got to cut that out of his game completely. So yeah, he's my spinner.
yeah. Thiemo and I think we're in quarry on our spinner as well. We've both gone Alpine. I think there's just sort of, for a team that should be doing so much better, they just aren't, I think is where it lays.
And I'm just not sure I'm going to forgive them anytime soon for doing. So I'm going to hold on to that one for a long time to come.
A slightly less data-driven question then. Best Grand Prix. Thiemo, I'll let you kick off with your choice.
Definitely not what I would have chosen at the start of the year if I had to predict, considering it's been at the bottom ever since it first came onto the calendar for me. But weirdly, Miami, I think. I was toying with Silverstone, but I think Miami overall had just a bit of everything. You had the Ferrari drama, but then some excellent work by Lewis in the car, making his way through the field. You had Oscar and Lando and Max up there. You had George in amongst it as well. Just it was entertaining. And I think for me, the reason it kind of pipped Silverstone is because of that bloody penalty on Oscar. It robbed us of a proper, interesting fight for the win that we got a little bit of towards the end, but it was a poor imitation of what we could have had instead. So somehow Miami trumps it.
And Miami had the Lego car race as well.
I don't care too much for that, but
See, I'm going to go a little counter to you. For me, the British Grand Prix has to be one of my standout race weekends of the year because there were so many different plot lines and so many different drivers doing interesting things, picking strategy, going counter, making calls. And yeah, we got the sort of brilliant Lando Norris wins at home. We had Hulkenberg with his first podium, but we had sort of this moment where we see Oscar Piastri sort of really trying a few things and sort of not necessarily them working, but sort of we saw the fire in the belly with him as well, really sort of pushing the limits of what was available. And it
We got
was
the reverse of Australia as well with the photo, obviously, of the two McLarens going off the track and Max keeping it on the road in the background. Whereas this time you had the two McLarens out front and Max just sideways in the background going, oh, poetry's nice sometimes.
yeah, it's sort of it tells an important story across the season, and it was also just a really interesting Grand Prix to watch. So I think there were so many points for me that really sort of drew me in for the British Grand Prix, and I think it'll be one we'll look back on through the season and go, I think this was possibly sort of much as we did in 2021, where it had sort of like 4 or 5 defining moments. I
Mm.
feel the British Grand Prix might stand out as one of those moments come the
It
year.
always does.
It always does, but more so this year than potentially any since 21. Martin, your best Grand Prix?
Melbourne comes to mind. I think just with the weather and everything, and yeah, that all that chaos. And I think Lando did a really good job in Melbourne. He was asked a lot of questions, intermediates, dries, stops, starts, attack, defense, the restarts. That had all the rookies crashing. I think it was a it was a crazy race. So yeah, I like those types of races. I thought Spa was good as well. You never really knew if Lando was going to make it work on that harder tire, and he was getting close at one point. So I was always watching that one like to the end. So those two.
Mhm. And worst Grand Prix? Thiemo, I would like to hear your reasoning behind China.
It was dull as ditch water, is why. Nothing happened for the entirety of the Grand Prix. I mean, the only thing I can remember from that weekend is Hamilton winning the sprint, but as that's not the Grand Prix, doesn't matter squat for the Grand Prix at all. And the rest of it was just Lawson having an interesting couple of dive bombs and annoyingly getting penalties for moves that were fine, really. Um, the rest of it, I mean, tell me what happened. Without looking at notes, without Googling, without any of that, tell me what happened in China. Nothing happened. And I woke up for what?
Yeah,
So I guess there was the Ferrari thing with the Leclerc's front
Oh,
wing
yeah,
and
that
all
was
of
really
that.
worth waking
That
up
was
for, getting
yeah, that was
disqualified.
about it.
It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
yeah. And Gasly was disqualified from that one as well, but I can't remember why. But yeah, yeah, I'll give you China. It wasn't particularly exciting, and I don't
At least
think.
something interesting, at least something worth talking about happened with your choice. It wasn't good in a, it wasn't worth talking about in a positive way, but at least something happened.
Yeah,
Is
for
my
me,
counter for you.
yeah, Monaco Grand Prix. I don't think you can really call it a Grand Prix if, again, you don't have any change in order in the top 10, and you even have
Mm.
Ollie Behrman doing a challenge with himself to see how slowly he can complete a lap. And eventually you have George Russell just sending one across the chicane just to try and get past Alex Albon, only to have to give the.
We've all done that on the F1 game at some point, just to try and see if we can get away with it.
Yeah, so I think for me, Monaco, I'm hoping that the new cars, given that they're going to be a bit smaller, a bit lighter, a bit slidier, are going to bring something exciting back to Monaco. Because when Monaco is good, which is either when it's wet or when it's qualifying or when it's Formula 2, because the cars are smaller, it works. But when it's dry with the modern big behemoths, it
Doesn't.
doesn't work. Yeah, it's only
Yeah, I
there.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Jesse Monaco was a bad race. Yeah.
Yeah. When you've got drivers doing a challenge of how slowly can I do this, it stops being a very exciting race, I think. But there we are. That brings us neatly to the end of our half-term review for Formula One this year. Pretty much all we've got time for, despite the fact we've been chatting for nearly 2 hours at this point, I should think. We'll be back soon with a preview of the Dutch Grand Prix. In the meantime, Martin, where can the people find you if they'd like more Martin Villari?
Lower lap time on all the socials, doing previews as well, race reviews on YouTube, lower lap time, and yeah, Instagram, TikTok, all that usual stuff.
Perfect. And Thiemo, if people want more from you, where can they find you?
The same places except a different handle, basically. t.albers.daily on the curves for interviews and podcasts aplenty.
Lovely stuff. And if you want more from me, pick up the latest issue of Classic Car Weekly or check out the Classic Car Weekly podcast, which yeah, is out on all the usual platforms as well. In fact, my editor is probably wondering where I am because I'm essentially 52 minutes late from starting work, but we won't turn that. Anyway, we'll be back soon with a preview for the Dutch Grand Prix.